my name is Mr. Goins. Some of you may know the other Goins kids, Karis and Nathan and Kira, and also Mrs. Goins works in the office. So we are the Goins gang, and I am the head of the Goins gang. So nice to meet you all, at least through video this week. So I have the privilege of doing devotions for chapel today. And so I hope you all are having a good week. You're about halfway through. And spring break's only a couple weeks away. So to encourage you to keep pressing on with that. So I have been a pastor, youth pastor, counselor, school teacher. I used to teach at Covenant Christian High School, also Traders Point, where I worked with Mr. Klingerman, the Honorable Mr. Klingerman, and also at what's called the Master Study. And so been working with young people for 36 years and thoroughly enjoy being around them and caring for them in my life. And so I also used to work at what's called a children's home. Now, the children's home was a place about an hour-ish from here, and it was kids who were in trouble with the law. So, like, they didn't go to school, or they stole something, or they were in a gang and did some bad things, and they went before a judge and were sent away to this children's home where I was campus minister and also a counselor and working with them. So in thinking about today's talk, I was reminded of a young lady. Her name is Valerie. And Valerie and I were talking, and she was a kind of a tough girl from up in northern Indiana. And I remember the story she told me one night about when she would go to sleep at night because of, this seemed like crazy to me because I grew up in a very safe and wonderful home. I never would have thought about this. She had a baseball bat next to her bed. She had a crowbar underneath her bed. She had a 9mm Glock gun by her bed. And underneath her pillow, she had a knife. And you're like, oh my goodness. And she wasn't like a crazy weapons collector. She had grown up in a home that was not safe. And so she lived literally in fear all the time. Now, generally speaking, she seemed like this really calm and had it together girl. That is because she was actually in a place that was safe. She didn't have to go to bed like that every single night. So you and I may not live with a baseball bat next to our bed or a knife underneath our pillow, but all of us have fears, right? When we're a little kid, we fear two things: falling and loud noises. And that's what we fear. And then we grow up and we may learn to fear other things. Like maybe some of you may believe that there was a boogeyman underneath your bed or in the closet, right? Monsters, Inc. And so you think about there's a monster somewhere or a monster university that's training up monsters to come and scare you. And then you get older and you realize, okay, there wasn't a monster under my bed with all that kind of thing. Of course, this last year, right, about this time, we start really hearing about COVID, and people start having differing opinions on that. But either way, all those things come out of something of fear. And of course, the world has a lot of fears, right? We have a tsunami warning last week, or we have a volcano over here, or we have big snowstorms, and so we may fear certain things like that. We may live in a family that we feel fearful. Sometimes we can live with someone who yells really loud, or I had a student whose mom was drunk and would come home drunk, and she had to take care of her family because her mom had too much. So she feared what her evening was going to be like. Sometimes we can have an over fear of God. There are people who just have these incredible fears of God, and sometimes we can fear ourselves, right? That we may do something stupid or not be good enough, and we have a little bit of fear in our life because of that. Sometimes people have a fear of the future, right? Of what's going to happen. And they get really concerned. Well, if this happens, then that's going to happen, and then that's going to happen. You're like, whoa, hold down. There's like a 97% chance none of those things are actually going to happen. Do you remember King David? Remember the great story of facing Goliath? Remember that when he was a kid or a young man, he took on a bear and a lion, right? Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And he was this strong, courageous man. But when you read through the Psalms, you also read he was very fearful. There were Psalms that he would start out, oh God, protect me, watch over me. These men are chasing me. They're going to kill me. And so he was fearful of that. And then, you remember the story of Jesus? One of my favorite stories of Jesus is him and the disciples were on a boat. Now, remember, a couple of these disciples were fishermen. They had been out in big storms before, right? So he was out in this big storm. And all of a sudden, Jesus is asleep. He had a hard day teaching and healing and all that. And he's worn out. And so this huge storm comes, and the whole boat's going all over the place and going crazy. And the disciples are freaking out, and they wake up Jesus and says to them and goes, oh, you of little faith. And they had just seen him do a ton of miracles, right? Just that day before. And he looks up and basically looks at the storm and says, be quiet. And everything is calm. And it's a reminder that Jesus in that moment, that you didn't have to have this giant fear. So, two words here, fear versus faith, right? So are we anxious, feel overwhelmed, or do we have faith in Jesus in all circumstances? Going back to David, even though David would start out the psalm and say, oh, I'm being chased by these men, or Lord, help me, my enemy is coming, he would end with, but Lord, you are my rock, you are my refuge, you are my hiding place. And he found himself safe with God, who cared for him and was going to watch over him. And so we think about this, and we think about how God is there for us and how he wants to care for us. David also had good friends who would come alongside him and fight literally beside him and be a part of his life so that he didn't have to be as fearful. So as you can tell, we're out in a cornfield in here, and I have a little bunch of corn here, if you can see this. And this is all filled with these nice little yellow seeds, right? And we think about, we can either have a seed, there you go, have a seed of fear, or you can have a seed of faith. Which do you want to have? And what God says is, I've put within you trust in me. So it's through his word, right? We read his word and we see how God worked through people, right? And he plants in us a seed of faith. And then we have his community, people around us who come and love us and appreciate us and say, hey, you're safe here. You're good, right? It's the community of being together. And then God himself reminds us that I am your refuge and your rock. You don't need to fear anything, right? You don't need to fear that. And God reminds us over with his presence. Jesus, right? You remember the story? Jesus looks down and says, why do you care about tomorrow? Why? I don't understand. Why are you doing that? Look at the lilies of the field. Even Solomon was not adorned as beautiful as they are. Are they worried? No. Look at the birds of the air. Are they worried about that? No. He says, tomorrow's got enough worry of its own. Why are you worrying about that? Why are you not doing it? Have faith. Trust. If God the Father's going to take care of all this other stuff, I think he's going to take care of you. Because you are made in his image. Paul later will talk to 1 Timothy, and he says, Timothy, why do you have a spirit of fear? You're not supposed to have a spirit of fear. You're supposed to have power. You're supposed to have love. And you're supposed to have self-control. That's what you're supposed to have. Power, love, self-control. Not fear, Timothy. Trust in who God has made you and what he has already placed in you deeply because of that. And so we need to trust in him that has given him so much wonderful faith. Right? So behind me there's this big tree over here, right? So the question is Jesus talks about our faith, right? If we have faith in him, it'll grow like a mustard seed. Now this corn is only going to grow about 10 or 12 feet high, right? Depending on where we plant it. But, so the question is this like a Evelyn Satry, right? Is this a Finn Satry, or is this a Mr. Satry, or is hit a big old tree back here. That's the goal, right here. The goal is to grow in faith so that in this we can grow and trust in God and know that we don't have to have fear, we don't have to have anxiety for those things, and we can just trust in Him for that. So we want to be able to have a wonderful and growing faith. This tree's gone through a lot. This tree could tell a lot of stories. All kinds of storms and hail and wind, and it's still standing. God says in Psalm 1, if you meditate upon the Word of God and drink deeply of Him, that you will bear fruit in your life. To go back and quote Jesus, Jesus says, greater is He that is in me than he that is in the world. That's what we have to remember. So if you would, when you start feeling anxious, fearful, and overwhelmed, I want you to picture, in fact, you can look this up, Rembrandt's picture of Jesus on the ship in the middle of the sea. It's a beautiful picture. Wonderfully done. And it reminds us that in the midst of a great storm, we have no reason to fear. None. No reason to fear. Because you and I believe in someone who can stand up and say, be quiet. And the storm quiets. So, we ask Him to calm us, to be with us in the midst of that storm. A couple weeks, my friend Jenny's going to come to GCA, and she's going to talk about fear and anxiety and how to deal with that. It's going to be open for your parents to come, and it's going to be a way of encouraging, giving some more tools than what I've given you today to do that. And so again, my name is Mark Goins. I am the Director of New Life Counseling, just a few minutes from here. And I pray that you will have a great day and that you will love, as we said for Paul to Timothy, that you would have the power of love and His power and self-control in you this day. May you be blessed and find your peace in Him. Thank you.